Hey everybody, Gabriel here. This podcast I'm actually videoing as well, and I had this on my heart and I wanted to share it with you, so I pulled over real quick. I always like to tell you where I am when I'm doing it. I pulled over here real quick in the neighborhood by the clubhouse because it's a nice, quiet area to park and it's shady. It's a nice, hot August day. But anyway, I wanted to talk about getting better rather than bitter. That's easier said than done. It's been the subject of conversation lately amongst several folks. It's fun. It's funny how you'll find themes, right? And I'm like, okay, I need to talk about this. And there's a lot of pat answers, a lot of quick answers on how to get better rather than bitter. People will say you just need to get over it. I hear that, but when you're in the midst of it, that is extraordinarily difficult to just simply let go of it, especially if it's something pretty serious. Some people will say just let go and let God, and I completely agree with that. You should, but how do you do it? It's not that easy to let go of that, especially when the poison sets in, and the words or the circumstances of the situation is so profound. How do you just quickly give it over to God? Which is something, by the way, for those of you that understand that, that takes practice. There are things that happen to me now that I can literally turn over to God like that. But years ago, when things would happen that many times were even less ugly, it was far harder to turn it over. So for those of you that understand that, it comes with practice, and it comes with faith. You have to trust. A lot of the times, the reason we can't let go of it quicker than we do is because you have to trust that if you let go of it, that He will do something about it. Because if you hold on to it, unless you can really do something about it that's going to matter and actually change, that's going to end up positive, you're just hurting yourself. The biggest thing about getting better instead of bitter also is the reason we have to let it go. I mean, there's a time something happens, deal with it. I mean, you might shut down for a while. You might have to cope with the words and the mini movie running through your mind. It might just rattle your nerves, create a lot of emotion initially, but eventually that sting does go away. But the reason we have to let go of it as quickly as we can. And there's grace there. Remember, you'll get better at it as you grow in life, hopefully. Some people get worse at it, but that also comes with practice. You either get better at getting better, or you get better at getting bitter. And anyway, but the challenge with that, I think you'll hear the cicadas. So forgive that rattle in the background. But one of the other things is the reason you have to drop it, the reason you have to get rid of it, is because it will eat you alive. It'll steal from you. It will paralyze you. It will keep you from ever gaining ground. So here's this thing that happens, and as ugly as it is, and as much as it shouldn't have happened, as much as it needs to change, and as much as it was unjustified, and the lies and whatever happens, the key is you can't partner with it and add fuel to that fire by getting bitter, because not only did it happen, but now you're partner with it for too long and you're stolen from twice. And see, once you're paralyzed, you can't do anything. I remember times past, this was years ago, one particular thing was so devastating. Now I look back and I thank God it happened, because at least it cut it out of my life completely. But there was accusation and things done to me, things said about me, whole groups of people, social circles of those groups of people, a large group, a large portion of the church, actually, all believed, heard, and thought certain things about me in a particular circumstance. And I was so rattled by it. I was so hurt by it. I was so infuriated by it There was threats, there was accusation. It was so bad that I can honestly say this. I've never hated anything and anyone or any group of people with that level of hate in my life. To describe it to you it was so tangible. It was so alive around me. It was so crippling around me. And that level of hate it burrowed so deep into my soul, into my mind, that I couldn't escape it. I couldn't, it's like being in water and you want to be dry. You can't get the water off of you. And I literally had to beg God. Not that you have to beg him, right? We should know him better than that. But I was at the point where I had to beg God to take it from me because I did not know how to overcome it. There got to a point where it was so bad that I had to say out of my mouth, I forgive that person and that person and that person and those people. I had to say it out of my mouth. I didn't feel it. I felt like a hypocrite. The last thing, because it was so alive in me, how could I say words that I had no feeling? But just to utter it like in this pitiful, feeble, desperate way, I forgive them, started to pull the roots out of me. And remember, it was nothing I did. It was something that was done to me, and it was a way that people were trying to protect themselves from what was done. And that was a start. To be able to even get those words out of my mouth might have been the hardest thing in the world. If I reflect back upon it now, and again, there's no reason to go into detail. But now I'm like, thank God. Because they revealed who they were. And I had allowed the web to be so entangled around me in my life that exodus had to happen at that level. Those kids are in a golf cart yelling at me while I'm sitting here. But that exodus had to be so severe and so quick, and the terror had to be so fast that I'm thankful because guess what? They revealed who they were. They showed me their hand, right? They revealed their hand. And I needed to see it because I wasn't seeing it as clearly as I needed to. Now, I always suspected. I always knew it was ugly in the background. I always knew there was things going on. But when you're entangled, how do you just step away? So the ugliness was so profound that now I look back and I'm like, thank goodness. Because number one is it taught me how to fight on my knees. You might have heard the song. It's an old song by a group named Petra, a Christian band from years ago. And one of the songs they had was "Get on your knees and fight like a man." I can hear it in my head, the song. And you'll pull down strongholds if you just believe you can, right? And so the reason I want to talk about this is because when you're talking to people, you're out and about in life. I'm parked here. I've watched people go by in their golf carts. Everybody's taking their kids to the pool. They're playing tennis. They're playing the playground. All these different things. You don't know what's going on. There is somebody that is inches or centimeters or millimeters away from just complete and total breakdown. And a lot of folks are just experts at covering it up. But when you're putting that much energy and effort into trying to cover up the pain, you actually are like a walking zombie. You just walk around in almost a catatonic state in autopilot because you just have to, because it's the only way you can cope. But when things like that happen that were that profound, it really taught me how to even relinquish something like that. Somebody would say, well, it was meant to happen. No, it never should have happened. Let me put it that way. And there's many things, many entanglements, friendships, relationships, associations that you should never have engaged in. And it wasn't supposed to happen. It never should have happened. Nevertheless, because it happened, and God was merciful, and somehow I was able to get on my knees and fight like a man, I learned how to fight in the most desperate place in the world. Some people, even recently, I've had conversations with folks that have seen things happen with the companies they worked for, with friendships and people they knew for years and years and years that suddenly turned a corner, and they now see these people for who they are, or they see the relationship for what it is, and it's catastrophic. I had a conversation with some folks about company decisions that were made, and in a simple decision, in 5 minutes, the destruction, the fallout, and the pain was so profound. They don't know how they're going to go forward. Now, the company can do it snapping their fingers. And as I was telling them, all of the injustice and all of the pain, as true as it is, and as wrong as it was, and as callous as it was, the company doesn't care. You have a choice now that happened. You have to get better, because you can't get bitter. If you get bitter, you're paralyzed. And then you give them even more power. In a relationship, when you are able to see one for what it is and you're able to step away, you have to get better, because if you get bitter, you're giving them more power. And here's a little tractor here. Hopefully it won't be too loud here on the video. But I'll tell you what, every day we have an opportunity to become better and not bitter. And I'm not just talking about super profound things that are life level. I'm talking about just wrongs that shouldn't have been. There are people that were passed up by bonuses. There are people that missed their Christmas bonuses. There are people that were passed up for position. There are situations when you were going to buy a house and something happened and it ends up being sold to somebody else. There are situations where a phone call happens and they said something the wrong way. It's not what they meant. Both parties took it wrong, and a phone call turns into a 5 or 10 year riff between family members. I have family members, close ones, that haven't had conversations in 35 years with their siblings because they got bitter and not better, and have never been able to overcome it, and still believe and still replay it to the degree that it just happened yesterday. If they start talking about it, all the emotions are back up because they've never released it. See, the thing about poison, when it gets in there, it just wants to stay in the system, stay in the system, stay in the system. And unless you purge it out of the system, it's going to affect all the cells. And they never just said, you know what, I forgive you. I hate this. It was destructive. It hurt my life. You hurt me. But see, what they didn't realize is they can't have that conversation with the individual. They have to have that conversation with themselves, and they have to have that conversation with God. Because it's so sensitive that if they have the conversation with the person and they're trying to work it out, but they say it the wrong way during the workout, it's going to send it into another 20-year problem. And I just know that this is a very real. I mean, Holly and I, over the last couple of years, we've had a couple things that happened to us that were suddenlies, and they were so profound. In the next sentence, we have to figure out how we're going to go forward now with the new rules, or with the new circumstances around us. And as I've spoken on prior podcasts, I wrote about this in my book, Cut It Out, specifically to those people that are working for themselves, that circumstances are you're in a circumference. You're standing, there's a stance you have, and there's a circumference around you, and it feels like you're paralyzed. And you have to realize you're not your circumstances. Your circumstances burrow themselves into you so profoundly and so completely that you cannot differentiate the difference between you and your circumstances as being one. You have to realize it's a temporary thing. It is a momentary thing. You are separate from it, and you can step out of it. And so getting better and not bitter, honestly, is a mandate, because you will not go forward. You cannot go forward. And your business, your life, relationships, injustices with the company you work for, injustices with family, relationships, friends, if they had just done the right thing. Let me tell you something, folks. Most people do the right thing. But there are just people out there that will do what they're going to do regardless of how it affects people. There are companies that will make decisions regardless of the pain that it inflicts on the people that gave their lives to it. There are friendships that will take a sudden turn because one person's preservation is more important than the friendship. So getting better is not something you don't have a choice. You must get better, because remember, you see, you have a life to live still yet, and you've got to move forward. And think about this. If you have one major letdown a year happen that's so big that it takes you a year to unwind from it, and everything is domino affected because of your paralysis, then all you need is one juicy problem a year to steal your life away, because the rest of your life, as one shows up, it'll take you a year to get out of the one that happened, and all you need is one a year. And guess what? That's the end of you. If you're a little more resilient, and it takes two major problems a year to take you out, so you can handle one in 6 months and another one comes up 6 months later, there again, your year is still gone. And every day, whether major or minor, you have an option and a sovereign decision to get better and not bitter. And the greatest power in the world, or one of them, is in a world with contrary circumstances. In a world now where it is popular to even claim that wicked things and evil things and ugly things are righteous, and righteous things and godly things and pure things are evil. Remember, everything is switched. That's how you condition a generation. You teach the youth that good is bad and bad is good, and then when you go into adulthood of that generation, then what is bad is the normal, and righteous things are ugly, or seen as ugly and threatening, and things that are evil are embraced. And this has always been all through history. Every major kingdom of the world has been this way. The Roman Empire did it. The U.S. has done it, is doing it. It's just because you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with good and evil. You're dealing with spiritual forces, regardless if you want to agree with that or not on the podcast. It's just the reality of it. And unless you understand how to use your weapons, you'll never, for instance, there's a verse that talks about putting on the full armor of God, right? There's a breastplate of righteousness. Why? Because when you understand that He put His righteousness around your heart is protected, and you can lean on His purity and His truth and His righteousness. When you put on the helmet it's called the helmet of salvation, your mind has been washed. Your mind is being, by putting on that helmet, you're allowing your mind to be renewed by, and for those of you that understand this, by the washing of the water of the Word, meaning the Scriptures, meaning God's truth. You're able to wash your mind and renew it so you can even function, right? Breastplate of righteousness, helmet of salvation, the shield of faith. Why? Because the shield of faith, it says, is able to extinguish all of the fiery darts of the enemy. There's an enemy out there, folks. Scripture says we're not dealing with flesh and blood. We're dealing with principalities and powers and rulers over darkness and rulers in high places. You have to learn to take every thought captive and put it under the obedience of the things that God says. These are the real ways to be victorious. Now, I know psychiatrists and psychologists and a lot of the self-help world does their best, and they do a bang-up job doing it. But unless you really get to the root and you realize it's a spiritual war, you can't extend mercy. You can't extend love. You can't forgive. You really can't. Because to forgive really takes God's nature. Because he was able to do it having given everything and still forgave them, for they knew not what they were doing. But breastplate of righteousness, helmet of salvation, shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, right? You're able to cut through and fight off all of those things because you realize your battle is a spiritual battle. It's not just the flesh trying to do it, right? You've girded your loins with truth, right? And we could have a whole podcast on that one. But those are the sensitive areas that you can be attacked in. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, the sensuality, all those things that drive people and put them in compromising circumstances. So when you can gird your loins, where life comes from it, let's just get real, and you can protect those areas, then you can't be affected and driven by those tendencies. Your feet are shod with the preparation, what does it say, of the gospel of peace. You're able to walk in peace because you are a heralder, you are a messenger of righteousness and truth. And as I've said before, if you read the verses, there's no armament and there's no protection for the backside. Why? Because as warriors that have to overcome in this world, you have to get better. You can't get bitter. You have to overcome for your future's sake. You have to overcome for your children's sake. The reason there's no armor on the back is because you were never meant to turn around and go backwards. You were never meant to turn around and show your back exposed to anyone, because you're supposed to always be moving forward and taking ground and taking territory. Easier said than done. Those things would never have been put in there, and he never would have given us the tools to overcome the incredible grievances in this world, the incredible level of grievance in this world, without giving us the ability to overcome them. And so I just want you to be encouraged today that becoming better and not bitter starts sometimes with the most painful thing imaginable, and that is choosing to forgive. And the other question that you have to ask yourself is, why are you getting bitter when something happens? Did you allow yourself to be at a place of need that you put yourself in a position so when, they say when a snake bites you, don't get mad at it. It was a snake all along. Don't get mad at the snake. When the snake bites you, it was always a snake. And if we go back many times, we say, you know what, I knew that was a snake all along. So I heard something really, really great one day. They were teaching on the only way that you can be used in this world, the only way you can be taken advantage of, is if you need something. Now, we all need each other. And even if you cover all your bases, you're still going to have injustices done. That's just the world we live in. There are going to be ugly things that happen even when you do everything right, but you have to do right anyway. And allow somebody else to just heap hot coals or if something is done to you, those decisions ultimately they'll destroy themselves if they don't change. But what you can't do is let your life be paralyzed by not realizing you have choices. And if you are at a place where you're needy, and you put yourself in situations where you're completely and totally dependent for something else, someone else, or an entity to give you what you need, and they don't do it, and it hurts you, well, that's because you put all your chips on that bet. And in life, you cannot afford to put all of your trust, your hope, your dreams, and your family's well-being on something, believing, you know what, they're going to do the right thing. They've got my back. They've got my family's back. You know what, I am confident they will do the right thing. That company will do the right thing. Those people will do the right thing. Guess what? They may not. And if you just wait for that, then you open yourself up, because again, we have a world where there's a lot of broken people, and there's a lot of hurt people that hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. So extend grace upon yourself. Don't become so needy that you put all of your cards in a position where you give the person, the entity, or whatever, total control over you. Get better and not bitter by realizing you have to, even if it is the last thing on this planet that you want to do. Because see, if we get bitter and not better, then we can keep pointing at, see, my life is challenged. My life has all of these pain points now because they did it, and we spend our whole time pointing at them. And there again, here comes another vehicle. There again, the whole time, we're sitting stationary, right? We're sitting stationary, and we're pointing fingers. They should have done this. They should have done that. I can't believe they didn't do this. There again, you have to get better and not bitter, because your life is being sucked away minute by minute by minute. Every time you sit on your hands and you wait and you just marinate in that ugliness. One of the ways that I've gotten better and not bitter is when something happens, I quickly go, I have to, because I can't live in this. I can't be paralyzed by their circumstances. I hate this now with all of my mind and heart, but if I don't get better by a decision and allow the feelings to come later, which they do, then I'm not going to have the capacity to function right now. I have to function right now. My wife needs me to function right now. My kids need me to function right now. Everybody we work for and work with and work around need us to function right now. Our future needs us to function right now. I have to be sober of mind. I have to be able to see through stuff. I cannot be paralyzed. They will not win. I'll get the feelings later. I'll be free of it later, but right now it's got to be just sheer grit and sheer volition and sheer will and sheer just must. And you have to pull that out of nowhere. And it starts with that, because at least you have your footing at that point. At least you can go, okay, I'm standing there. Because you can't wait for the feelings to come before you're free. They'll come later. But you got to grab on to resolve absolutely as fast as you can so that you can function to move forward in life. So I hope this is an encouraging podcast. This too shall pass, as they say. And guys, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking with you. I'm a walking miracle. My wife and I both are. I mean, neither of us should be here. Most of you should not be here. You've overcome. And there's a reason why the scripture talks about to him who overcomes, and there's a whole list of crowns and levels of victory, and we're going to drink from a place that most of the world cannot. You have to. And those are the shining stars, the overcomers. You are an overcomer. And just the fact that you can listen through this whole podcast is evidence that you've made the first step. So it's with that. I'll see you guys on the next one. Go to GabrielSedlak.com for more resources and information as we're constantly putting stuff on the site. And I look forward to talking to all of you on the next podcast. Blessings, everyone. See ya. Bye-bye.